The dust cloud appeared on the horizon like a promise unfulfilled, trailing behind the lone figure of a woman who had ridden for 3 days straight. Nora Finley's hands were blistered from the reins, her back aching from the endless hours in the saddle, and her heart heavy with the burden of escape. The year was 1878, and the Montana Territory stretched before her like an ocean of grass, infinite and unforgiving to those who didn't understand its ways. The town of Copper Creek materialized as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the single dirt road lined with wooden structures. Nora's horse, a sturdy bay mare she'd named Penny, slowed to a weary walk as they approached. The animal was as exhausted as she was, perhaps more so, having carried not only her weight but also the small bundle of possessions Nora had managed to grab when she fled. "Easy now," Nora whispered, patting the mare's neck. "We'll find shelter soon." The town was small but lively, with saloon doors swinging open to release bursts of piano music and raucous laughter. Men in dusty clothes gathered on porches, eyeing the newcomer with undisguised curiosity. Women in practical dresses hurried about their evening errands, some stopping to stare at the bedraggled young woman atop the tired horse. Nora kept her head high despite her appearance. At 22, she had learned that showing weakness invited trouble. Her auburn hair was tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, her green eyes scanning the buildings for somewhere to rest. The general store, the blacksmith, the sheriff's office, none offered what she needed most: anonymity and a place to sleep. At the far end of the street stood a large barn beside a modest ranch house. A weather-beaten sign swung in the breeze: Xander Ranch. It was set apart enough from the main town that perhaps she could find a moment's peace there. Guiding Penny toward the barn, Nora dismounted with effort, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. She tied the mare to a post and approached the open barn doors cautiously. The smell of hay and horses greeted her, comforting in its familiarity. "Hello." She called out, her voice barely above a whisper. When no response came, she ventured further inside. The barn was well maintained, with stalls for at least a dozen horses, though only half were occupied. A ladder led to a hayloft above, and Nora's tired eyes gazed up at it longingly. Just one night, she told herself. One night to rest, and then she would be on her way again before anyone discovered her. She cared for Penny first, removing the saddle and bridle, giving her water and a portion of oats from a nearby barrel. The mare deserved that much after their arduous journey. Only then did Nora climb the ladder to the hayloft, her arms trembling with fatigue. The hayloft was warm, the hay fresh and sweet-smelling. Nora arranged a small hollow for herself, placed her saddlebags beneath her head, and pulled her coat tightly around her body. Sleep came almost instantly, deep and dreamless. She awoke to the sound of boots on the wooden floor below. Daylight filtered through cracks in the barn walls, indicating she had slept through the night and into the morning. Nora froze, scarcely breathing as the footsteps moved directly beneath her hiding place. "I know you're up there," a deep voice called out. "I found your horse in my stable." Nora's heart pounded. She had meant to be gone before dawn, before anyone discovered her presence. Now she was caught, trespassing on a stranger's property. "I'm not looking for trouble," she answered, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'll be on my way." "Come down first," the man replied. "We need to talk." Reluctantly, Nora gathered her belongings and descended the ladder. At the bottom stood a man who embodied everything she imagined when she thought of the word cowboy. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the sky after a storm. His dark hair was pushed back from his forehead, and a day's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. "I'm sorry," she said, standing as straight as her tired body would allow. "I was just looking for a place to rest. I'll pay you for the feed my horse took." The man studied her for a long moment, taking in her disheveled appearance and the wariness in her eyes. "Name's Hunter Xander," he finally said. "This is my ranch, Nora Finley," she replied, offering nothing more. "You're running from something," Hunter observed. It wasn't a question. Nora tightened her grip on her saddlebags. "That's my business." Hunter nodded, surprising her with his acceptance. Everyone's got something they'd rather leave behind, but you look like you haven't had a proper meal in days and your horse needs more rest than one night can give her." "I can't stay," Nora said quickly. "I need to keep moving." "To where?" The simple question caught her off guard. Where was she going? She had no plan beyond escape, no destination beyond away. Hunter seemed to read the uncertainty on her face. "I've got work that needs doing around here. The woman who used to help with the cooking and cleaning left last month to marry a miner up north. I could use an extra pair of hands for a while." Nora's instinct was to refuse, to mount Penny and ride out immediately. But the thought of more days on the trail with no destination and dwindling supplies made her hesitate. "It would just be temporary," Hunter added, as if sensing her internal debate. "Until you figure out where you're headed, room and board plus a small wage." "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" Nora asked suspiciously. Hunter shrugged. "Because I've been where you are. Someone offered me help once when I needed it. I'm just passing it along." There was something in his eyes, a sincerity that Nora rarely encountered. Still, she had learned the hard way that kindness often came with expectations. "I'm not. I won't." She began awkwardly. Hunter raised a hand. "Nothing improper. You'll have your own room in the house. The ranch hands sleep in the bunkhouse out back." "I've got a reputation to maintain in this town, Miss Finley. I don't mistreat my workers, and I don't take advantage of women in difficult situations." Nora weighed her options, which were admittedly few. She had little money left, and Penny needed proper rest. A few weeks of work might give her time to plan her next move. "1 week," she said finally. "I'll stay 1 week and then we'll see." Hunter nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Fair enough. Come on up to the house. You look like you could use a hot meal and a real bed." The Xander house was modest but well-built, with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Inside, the furniture was simple but sturdy, the floors swept clean. It spoke of a man who took pride in his home but had little time for embellishments. "Kitchen's through there," Hunter said, pointing. "Your room will be the one at the end of the hall. Bathroom's out back. It's not much, but it's dry and warm." "It's more than enough," Nora replied, following him through the house. The bedroom was small but pleasant, with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out over the rolling plains. It was the first real room she'd had to herself in weeks, and the sight of the bed nearly brought tears to her eyes. "Get yourself settled," Hunter told her. "There's a wash basin and clean water. Come to the kitchen when you're ready for some food." After he left, Nora set her few possessions on the chest of drawers and sank onto the edge of the bed. The mattress was softer than anything she'd felt in recent memory. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps this was a sanctuary, however temporary. She washed her face and hands, smoothed her hair as best she could, and changed into her cleanest shirt before making her way to the kitchen. Hunter stood at the stove, stirring something that smelled delicious. "Hope you like stew," he said without turning around. "It's not fancy, but it'll fill you up." At this point, anything hot would be welcome, Nora admitted. They ate in companionable silence, the stew rich with vegetables and tender chunks of beef. Nora had to force herself not to eat too quickly, though her stomach clamored for more with every bite. "Tomorrow I'll show you what needs doing around here," Hunter said as they finished. "But for today, just rest. You look like you're about to fall over." Nora wanted to protest that she wasn't that fragile, but the bone-deep weariness made a liar of her. "Thank you," she said instead. "For the meal and everything." Hunter nodded, his expression unreadable. "Like I said, I've been there. Get some sleep, Miss Finley. Tomorrow's soon enough to start earning your keep." As Nora lay in the unfamiliar bed that night, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling around her, she couldn't help but wonder about the man who had shown her such unexpected kindness. Hunter Xander was clearly respected in Copper Creek, his ranch prosperous enough to employ several hands. Yet he lived alone in this house, with no sign of family. What was his story? And more importantly, would he still offer his help if he knew the truth about hers? Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the distant lowing of cattle. Nora woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She dressed quickly in her worn but clean clothes and made her way to the kitchen. To her surprise, Hunter had already prepared breakfast, eggs, bacon, and biscuits that were still warm from the oven. "You cook," she observed, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Hunter glanced up from his coffee. "Had to learn when my pa died." Can't expect ranch hands to work on empty stomachs, and hiring a cook out here isn't always easy. "Where's your mother?" Nora asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "Died when I was 10. Fever took her," Hunter replied matter-of-factly. "Pa raised me alone until I was 19. Then his heart gave out one winter. Been running the place ever since." "I'm sorry," Nora said softly, taking a seat at the table. Hunter shrugged. "It was a long time ago. Eat up before it gets cold." After breakfast, Hunter showed her around the ranch. It was larger than it had appeared from the road, with grazing land stretching far beyond the main buildings. The bunkhouse housed 4 ranch hands, all of whom tipped their hats respectfully to Nora when Hunter introduced her as Miss Finley, who will be helping around the house for a spell. Her duties, Hunter explained, would include cooking, cleaning, mending, and helping with the vegetable garden behind the house. It was honest work, the kind Nora had grown up doing before her life had taken its unexpected turn. "I can handle that," she assured him, relieved that her responsibilities would keep her close to the house and away from town. The first few days fell into a rhythm. Nora rose early to help prepare breakfast for Hunter and the ranch hands before they rode out to tend the cattle. She spent the mornings cleaning the house, which had clearly suffered from the absence of a woman's touch. In the afternoons, she worked in the garden, weeding and harvesting the vegetables that supplemented their meals. By the end of the first week, the house was cleaner than it had been in months, and Nora had prepared enough preserved vegetables to last well into the winter. She took pride in the transformation, though she reminded herself that her stay was temporary. On the 7th day, as they sat at the kitchen table after the ranch hands had returned to the bunkhouse, Hunter brought up their agreement. "Your week's up," he said, pushing away his empty plate. "You still planning to move on?" Nora hesitated. The truth was, she had begun to feel safe at the Xander Ranch. The work was hard but satisfying, and Hunter had proven to be a fair and respectful employer. More than that, she enjoyed his company during the quiet evenings when they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the plains in gold and crimson. "I should," she said finally, "but if you still need the help." Hunter's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "The work's there if you want it. Your horse is looking better, but another week or 2 of rest wouldn't hurt her." It was an excuse, and they both knew it. Penny had recovered her strength days ago, but Nora seized it gratefully. "Another week, then," she agreed. As the days passed, Nora found herself watching Hunter when he wasn't looking. There was a quiet strength about him that she found increasingly attractive. He was kind to his horses, patient with the youngest ranch hand who was still learning the ropes, and unfailingly respectful toward her. In turn, she caught him observing her sometimes, his blue eyes thoughtful. Once, when she was hanging laundry in the yard, she looked up to find him watching from the corral. Their eyes met for a long moment before he turned away, returning to his work with the horses. 2 weeks became 3, and still Nora found reasons to stay. The weather was turning cooler as autumn approached, and she told herself it made sense to remain in one place rather than traveling as winter drew near. Hunter never questioned her continued presence, though sometimes she caught a look on his face that suggested he wanted to ask about her past. It was on a crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch drinking coffee, that the questions finally came. "You ever going to tell me what you're running from?" Hunter asked, his voice gentle. Nora stiffened, her hands tightening around her mug. "What makes you think I'm running?" Hunter gave her a knowing look. "The way you freeze up whenever riders approach the ranch. How you make excuses not to go into town. The fact that you arrived here with almost nothing but the clothes on your back." Nora stared out at the darkening landscape, weighing her words carefully. "It's not a pretty story. Few of them are," Hunter replied. "But carrying it alone doesn't make it any lighter. Perhaps it was the gathering dusk that made confession easier, or perhaps it was simply that Hunter had earned her trust over the weeks they had spent together. Whatever the reason, Nora found herself speaking of things she had vowed to keep buried. "I was engaged," she began, To a man named Edward Blackwell. He was respected in our town, wealthy, from a good family. My father was ill, the farm was failing, and Edward offered security. She paused, sipping her cooling coffee. But after the engagement, he changed, or maybe he just stopped pretending. He became controlling, possessive. If I spoke to another man, even in passing, there would be consequences. Hunter's expression darkened. He hurt you. Nora nodded, her throat tight. Nothing visible at first. He was too clever for that. But then, as the wedding drew closer, he grew bolder. Said that as his future wife, I belonged to him already. The memory of those days made her skin crawl even now. The final time he broke my arm. Said I had been flirting with his business partner. I hadn't, of course, but the truth didn't matter to him. How did you get away? Hunter asked quietly. His sister, Nora replied. Catherine, she had suspected what was happening and helped me escape while Edward was away on business. She gave me money, helped me buy Penny, and told me to ride as far as I could. And you've been running ever since. Yes, Nora admitted. Edward has connections everywhere. Catherine warned me that he would search for me, that his pride wouldn't allow him to let me go. So I kept moving, never staying in one place for too long. Until now, Hunter observed. Nora met his gaze. Until now. They sat in silence as darkness fell completely, the only light coming from the lantern hanging by the door and the countless stars overhead. He won't find you here, Hunter said finally, his voice carrying a conviction that made Nora's heart ache with hope she dared not feel. You can't promise that, she replied softly. Hunter turned to face her, his expression resolute. I can promise that if he does, he'll have to go through me first. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to voice aloud. Nora found herself wanting to believe him, wanting to trust that this man could offer the safety she had been seeking. Thank you, she whispered, not trusting her voice with more. Hunter nodded, and they returned to their companionable silence, watching as the moon rose over the plains. That night, Nora lay awake long after she had gone to bed, replaying their conversation in her mind. Sharing her story had been both terrifying and liberating. For the first time since her escape, she had spoken Edward's name aloud, acknowledging the fear that had driven her across 3 territories, and Hunter hadn't judged her. He hadn't suggested she should have done things differently or questioned her decisions. He had simply listened, and then offered protection she hadn't asked for but desperately wanted to accept. What would it be like, she wondered, to stop running, to build a life in one place with people she cared about, with someone who might care for her in return? The thought sent a flutter of something warm and unfamiliar through her chest, and Nora pushed it away hastily. She couldn't afford such thoughts, not when her past could catch up to her at any moment. Still, as she finally drifted toward sleep, it was Hunter's face she saw, his promise echoing in her mind. The days grew shorter as October gave way to November. Frost painted the grass each morning, and the ranch hands worked to prepare the cattle for the coming winter. Nora found herself busier than ever, canning the last of the garden's harvest and helping Hunter weather-proof the house and barn. They worked well together, their movements falling into an easy rhythm that required few words. Nora began to notice the little things Hunter did, how he always made sure the firewood box was filled before turning in, how he remembered she preferred her coffee with just a touch of sugar, how he would remove his hat and boots at the door without being asked. In turn, she learned his preferences, the way he liked his shirts folded, his fondness for apple pie, how he would run his hand through his hair when deep in thought. Small things, domestic things, that made the house feel more like a home with each passing day. The arrangement remained unspoken between them. Nora no longer mentioned leaving, and Hunter no longer asked about her plans. They existed in a comfortable present, both perhaps afraid to examine too closely what the future might hold. Then came the first snowfall of the season, turning the world white overnight. Nora woke to find the ranch transformed, the familiar landscape rendered new and pristine beneath a blanket of snow. She dressed warmly and hurried to the kitchen, knowing the ranch hands would need a hearty breakfast before facing the cold. Hunter was already there, stoking the fire in the stove to drive away the morning chill. He looked up as she entered, a smile warming his features. "Morning," he greeted her. "Quite a sight out there, isn't it?" "Beautiful," Nora agreed, moving to help him with breakfast preparations. "But it will make the work harder." "That it will," Hunter nodded. "We'll need to break the ice on the water troughs and make sure the cattle have enough feed." Winter's settling in early this year. They worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing as they passed utensils back and forth. Each touch sent a jolt of awareness through Nora, a sensation she both welcomed and feared. After the ranch hands had eaten and headed out to their tasks, Hunter lingered at the table, watching as Nora cleared away the dishes. "I'm heading into town today," he said. "Need to pick up supplies before the snow gets deeper." "Want to come along?" Nora hesitated. She had avoided Copper Creek since her arrival, making excuses whenever Hunter suggested she accompany him. The town wasn't large, but there were always travelers passing through, and the risk of being recognized or worse, of someone mentioning her to Edward if he came asking, was too great. But the prospect of a day spent alone in the house suddenly seemed unbearable compared to hours in Hunter's company, even with the attendant risks. "All right," she agreed, surprising them both. Hunter's smile widened. "Good, we'll leave after I check on the hands." Nora dressed carefully for the trip, choosing her plainest dress and pinning her hair up beneath a bonnet that shadowed her face. It wasn't much of a disguise, but it offered some comfort as she prepared to venture into public for the first time in months. The journey to town was slow but pleasant, the wagon's runners gliding smoothly over the snow. Hunter had packed heated bricks wrapped in blankets to keep their feet warm and brought along a thermos of hot coffee to ward off the chill. "You look worried," he observed as they approached the outskirts of Copper Creek. Nora forced a smile. "Just out of practice with town life." Hunter studied her for a moment. "No one will bother you, you have my word on that." The simple assurance steadied her, and Nora found herself believing him. They made their way down the main street, the wagon wheels crunching through the snow. The town was busy despite the weather, with people hurrying between buildings and smoke rising from every chimney. Hunter helped her down from the wagon in front of the general store, his hands warm and strong at her waist. The contact lasted only a moment, but it left Nora flustered in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Inside, the store was warm and crowded with goods. Hunter greeted the proprietor by name and introduced Nora as Miss Finley, who's been helping out at the ranch. The simple introduction, devoid of explanation or qualification, gave their relationship a legitimacy that made Nora's cheeks flush. They moved through the store together, selecting supplies from Hunter's list. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt, ammunition for the rifles, new lamp oil, and a length of sturdy fabric that Hunter insisted Nora choose for herself. "For what?" she asked, running her fingers over a bolt of deep blue wool. "Whatever you want," Hunter replied. "A new dress, maybe. Winter gets cold here." The gesture touched her deeply. It had been so long since anyone had given her a gift, especially one chosen with such practical thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she said, selecting the blue wool. "It's lovely." As Hunter went to settle the bill, Nora wandered to the front of the store, gazing out at the snow-covered street. A group of riders was approaching from the north, their horses moving steadily through the white landscape. Something about the lead rider's posture sent a chill through Nora that had nothing to do with the winter air. She stepped back hastily, bumping into a display of canned goods. Hunter was at her side immediately, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "What is it?" "Those men," Nora whispered, nodding toward the window. "The one in front, something about him looks familiar." Hunter glanced outside, his expression hardening. "Stay here," he instructed, moving toward the door. "Hunter, no," Nora protested, grabbing his arm. If they're looking for me, then I'll find out," he said firmly. "But I won't let them near you. Trust me." Trust. Such a simple word for such a complex feeling. Nora realized with sudden clarity that she did trust Hunter Xander more than she had trusted anyone in a very long time. "Be careful," she pleaded. Hunter squeezed her hand once before stepping outside. Through the window, Nora watched as he approached the riders, his stance casual but alert. The lead rider dismounted, and the two men spoke briefly. Then, to Nora's immense relief, the rider remounted and the group continued down the street, turning toward the saloon at the far end. When Hunter returned to the store, his face was calm. "Just passing through," he told her quietly. "Looking for work with the railroad, nothing to do with you." The relief was so overwhelming that Nora's knees nearly buckled. Hunter caught her arm, supporting her. "You're safe," he assured her. "I promised you that, remember?" Nora nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Hunter's hand remained on her arm, a steady anchor in the storm of her emotions. "Let's get the supplies and head back," he suggested. "Storm's picking up again." The ride back to the ranch was quieter than their journey into town. The snow was falling more heavily now, creating a cocoon of white around the wagon that isolated them from the rest of the world. "Thank you," Nora said finally, breaking the silence, "for what you did back there." Hunter glanced at her, snowflakes catching in his dark hair. "I didn't do anything special." "You did," she insisted. "You believed me. You acted to protect me without question. That's more than most would do." Hunter was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the trail ahead. "I meant what I said that night on the porch. He'd have to go through me first." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Nora looked at Hunter's profile, strong and steady against the white backdrop of the storm, and felt something inside her shift irrevocably. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the hush of snow. Hunter turned to meet her gaze, and the emotion in his eyes took her breath away. "Because you matter to me, Nora, more than I expected, more than is probably wise." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips sent a warmth spreading through her despite the cold. "You matter to me too," she admitted, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "And that scares me more than anything Edward could do." Hunter's expression softened. "I know, and I won't push, but I want you to know that whatever happens, however long you stay, you have a place here, with me." The simple declaration, offered without demand or expectation, touched Nora deeply. For so long, she had been defined by her flight from danger. Now, for the first time, she was being offered a chance to define herself by what she was moving toward, not what she was running from. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to say more past the emotion clogging her throat. They completed the journey in silence, but it was a different kind of quiet now, one filled with possibility rather than uncertainty. The snowstorm intensified as they reached the ranch, the wind driving the flakes horizontally across the yard. Hunter hurried to unhitch the horses and get them into the barn while Nora carried the lighter supplies into the house. By the time Hunter came in, stomping snow from his boots on the porch, Nora had a fire blazing in the stove and coffee brewing. "The hands made it back before the worst hit," he reported, hanging his coat by the door. "They're settled in the bunkhouse with plenty of firewood. Looks like we're in for a proper blizzard." Nora handed him a steaming mug. "Will the cattle be all right?" "They know to find shelter in the low ravines," Hunter said, wrapping his cold hands around the warm mug. "We've done what we can. Now we wait out the storm." As evening approached, the wind howled around the corners of the house, finding every gap in the weatherproofing they had so carefully applied. Nora prepared a hearty stew for dinner, grateful for the supplies they had purchased that morning. They ate by lamplight, the storm having brought an early darkness. The house creaked and groaned around them, but inside was warm and secure. Nora found herself stealing glances at Hunter across the table, remembering their conversation in the wagon. After dinner, they moved to the sitting room where the main fireplace provided both light and heat. Hunter added another log to the flames while Nora settled on the sofa with her mending. "I've been thinking," Hunter said, taking a seat in the armchair opposite her. "About?" Nora prompted when he didn't continue. "About spring," he replied. "About planting more vegetables in the garden, maybe adding some fruit trees, about building on another room to the house." Nora's hands stilled on her mending. "Those sound like long-term plans." "They are," Hunter agreed, his eyes steady on hers. "And I was hoping they might be our plans, not just mine." The implication was clear, and Nora felt her heart beat faster. "Hunter, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know you're still looking over your shoulder. But I want you to have something to look forward to as well." Nora set aside her mending, struggling to find the right words. "What if he finds me? What if he brings trouble to your door? Then we'll face it," Hunter said simply. "Together." You can't know what he's capable of, Nora warned. Maybe not, Hunter acknowledged, but I know what I'm capable of, and I know that some things are worth fighting for. The conviction in his voice made Nora's breath catch. She had spent so long believing she wasn't worth the risk that her only choice was to keep running to protect those around her. Yet here was a man who looked at the danger and chose to stand beside her anyway. I don't want anyone else to get hurt because of me, she whispered. Hunter leaned forward, his expression earnest. Nora, life comes with risks. Every day we could lose everything to a storm, a fire, a cattle stampede. That's the reality of living out here. But we don't let the fear of what might happen stop us from building something worthwhile. His words struck a chord deep within her. For months, fear had been her constant companion, dictating her every move. But what kind of life was that? Always running, never allowing herself to form connections, to put down roots, to love. I'm tired of running, she admitted softly. Hunter rose from his chair and came to sit beside her on the sofa, close but not touching. Then stay, not just for a week or a month, stay for good. As your housekeeper, Nora asked, needing clarity despite the hope blooming in her chest. Hunter shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips. If that's all you want to be, then yes, but I was hoping for more, much more. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. The touch was gentle, respectful, but Nora felt it throughout her entire body. I've grown to care for you, Nora Finley, Hunter said, his voice low and sincere. More than I thought possible in such a short time. I'm not asking for promises you're not ready to make. I'm just asking for a chance to show you what life could be like if you stopped running. Nora looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, strong and calloused from years of hard work. Hands that had never struck her in anger, that had only offered support and kindness. I care for you too, she confessed, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. But I'm afraid. Of what? Hunter prompted gently. Of hoping. Of believing this could last. Nora raised her eyes to his. Of losing you if when Edward comes. Hunter's grip on her hand tightened slightly. He's one man, Nora, and this is my land, my town. People here know me, trust me. They don't know him. It was true, Nora realized. Edward's influence, so powerful in her hometown, meant nothing in Copper Creek. Here it was Hunter who had the respect of the community, the connections that mattered. I want to stay, she said finally, the words both terrifying and exhilarating. I want to plant those vegetables and fruit trees with you. I want to stop looking over my shoulder and start looking forward. The smile that lit Hunter's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. You won't regret it, he promised. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and Nora found herself responding with a certainty that surprised her. Her free hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they parted, Hunter rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the space between them. I've wanted to do that since I found you in my hayloft, he admitted. Nora laughed softly, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. I wouldn't have let you then. I know, Hunter replied, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. You needed time, I was willing to wait. The simple statement, so devoid of pressure or expectation, confirmed what Nora already knew. Hunter Xander was unlike any man she had ever met. Where Edward had demanded and taken, Hunter offered and waited. Where Edward had sought to control, Hunter sought to understand. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the walls of the house, Nora felt a peace she had almost forgotten was possible. The blizzard lasted 3 days, confining them to the house except for essential trips to check on the animals and the ranch hands. They spent the time in domestic harmony, cooking meals together, reading aloud from Hunter's small collection of books, talking about their pasts and cautiously, tentatively about their future. Each night, Hunter walked Nora to her bedroom door, kissed her gently, and bid her good night. Though she sensed he wanted more, and if she were honest, she did too, he never pressed, never assumed. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke, revealing a world transformed by snow. The ranch hands emerged from the bunkhouse to begin the arduous task of checking on the cattle, many of which would have sought shelter in the ravines to the west. Hunter prepared to join them, pulling on his heavy coat and wrapping a scarf around his neck. "I'll be back by sundown," he told Nora. "Don't worry if we're a little late, there's a lot of ground to cover." Nora nodded, handing him a package wrapped in cloth. "Sandwiches and coffee in the thermos. Be careful out there." Hunter smiled, tucking the package into his saddlebag. "Always am." He hesitated, then pulled her close for a quick kiss. "Keep the fires going. It'll be cold again tonight." After he left, Nora busied herself with household tasks, stoking the fires as instructed and preparing a hearty stew that would be ready when the men returned. The house felt strangely empty without Hunter's presence, and Nora realized how quickly she had grown accustomed to having him nearby. As promised, Hunter and the ranch hands returned just as dusk was falling, stomping snow from their boots on the porch. They were tired but satisfied all the cattle had been accounted for, with minimal losses. After the hands had eaten and returned to the bunkhouse, Hunter lingered in the kitchen with Nora as she washed the last of the dishes. "I have something I want to show you," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Curious, Nora dried her hands on her apron. "What is it?" "It's in the barn. Bundle up, it's cold out there." They made their way across the yard, the snow crunching beneath their boots. The night was clear now, the storm having swept the sky clean, and countless stars glittered overhead. Inside the barn, it was warmer, the body heat of the horses creating a respite from the biting cold outside. Hunter led Nora up the ladder to the hayloft where he had first discovered her sleeping. "Why are we up here?" Nora asked, looking around in confusion. The hayloft looked much as it had the day she arrived, though the hay was fresher and there was more of it. Hunter took a deep breath. "This is where our story began. Seemed fitting it should be where I ask you this." From his pocket, he withdrew a small object that gleamed in the light from the lantern he carried. A ring, simple but beautiful, with a small blue stone that matched the color of his eyes. "It was my mother's," Hunter explained, his voice solemn. "My pa gave it to her when they decided to build this ranch together." Nora's heart began to race, her breath coming in short, quick bursts. "Hunter, I know it's fast," he said quickly. "I know we've only known each other a few months, but sometimes when something's right, you just know it." He took her hand, his touch warm despite the cold air. "Nora Finley, I'm asking you to be my wife, to build a life here with me, to face whatever comes together. I promise to protect you, to respect you, and to love you for as long as I live." Tears filled Nora's eyes, blurring her vision. "You don't know everything about me," she whispered. "I know enough," Hunter replied. "I know you're strong, brave, and kind. I know you work hard and care deeply. And I know that from the moment I found you up here, something changed in me, in this house." It was like a piece that had been missing suddenly fell into place. Nora looked at the ring, then at Hunter's face, open and hopeful in the lantern light. She thought about the weeks they had spent together, how naturally they had fallen into a rhythm of shared work and quiet companionship. She thought about the feeling of his lips on hers, gentle but certain, and she thought about Edward, about the fear that had driven her for so long. Would she let that fear determine the course of her life forever? Or would she find the courage to reach for happiness, even knowing the risks? "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Yes, I'll marry you." The joy that transformed Hunter's face was like nothing Nora had ever seen. He slipped the ring onto her finger, it fit perfectly, and then gathered her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an exuberant embrace. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with a passion that left her breathless. This wasn't the gentle, questioning kisses they had shared before. This was a promise, a claiming, a declaration. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I think I have since that first day." "I love you too," Nora replied, the words feeling both new and inevitable. "I tried not to, but it happened anyway." Hunter laughed, the sound echoing in the rafters. "Thank God for that." They stood together in the hayloft where it had all begun, wrapped in each other's arms as the winter night deepened around them. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Nora felt not just safe, but truly at home. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Copper Creek. The ranch hands offered their congratulations with broad smiles and knowing looks that suggested they had seen this coming long before Hunter and Nora had acknowledged it themselves. In town, the reaction was largely positive. Hunter was well respected, and while Nora was still somewhat of a mystery, her association with him lent her credibility. The women of Copper Creek, initially curious about the newcomer who had captured the eligible rancher's heart, soon warmed to Nora's quiet competence and genuine kindness. Only the town busybody, Mrs. Prescott, raised eyebrows over the hasty engagement. "Hardly knows the girl," she muttered to anyone who would listen. "Showed up out of nowhere, and now they're to be married. Mark my words, there's a story there." But even her disapproval couldn't dampen Hunter and Nora's happiness. They set the wedding date for the first day of spring, giving them time to prepare and for the worst of winter to pass. "I want to send word to Catherine," Nora told Hunter one evening as they sat before the fire. "She risked so much to help me. She should know I'm safe and happy." Hunter nodded, though his expression was cautious. "It's risky if Edward intercepts the letter." "I'll be careful," Nora promised. "No details about where I am, just that I'm well and getting married." She deserves to know that her help made this possible. The letter was duly written and sent with a passing cattle buyer who was heading east. Whether it would reach Catherine remained to be seen, but Nora felt better for having tried to reach out to the one person who had stood by her when she needed it most. As the weeks passed, Nora and Hunter fell into the rhythms of engaged life. During the day, they maintained their respective duties around the ranch, though now there were wedding preparations to consider as well. In the evenings, they planned their future together, talking of improvements to the ranch, dreams of children, hopes for the years to come. And at night, after Hunter walked Nora to her bedroom door for their customary goodnight kiss, she would lie awake, thinking of the day when the door would no longer close between them. Winter began to loosen its grip on the land as February gave way to March. The snow melted, revealing the first tentative shoots of green beneath. Nora's wedding dress made from the blue wool Hunter had bought her that day in town hung in her closet, awaiting the final fitting. It was on a mild day in early March, with the wedding just 2 weeks away, that the past Nora had been fleeing finally caught up with her. She was in the garden, clearing away the last of the winter debris in preparation for spring planting, when the sound of approaching riders drew her attention. Visitors were not uncommon at the ranch, but something about the deliberate pace of the horses made the hairs on the back of Nora's neck stand up. Rising from her kneeling position, she shaded her eyes against the afternoon sun and looked toward the road. 3 riders approached, their figures becoming clearer as they drew nearer. The man in the lead sat his horse with a rigid formality that sent a chill through Nora's body. Edward. For a moment, she couldn't move, frozen by a fear so visceral it felt like a physical blow. Then instinct took over, and she turned to run toward the barn where Hunter was working with one of the new colts. She had taken only a few steps when Edward's voice, cold and precise, stopped her in her tracks. "Nora, how convenient to find you outside. Saves me the trouble of dragging you from whatever hole you've been hiding in." Slowly, Nora turned to face the man she had fled from, the man who had haunted her nightmares for months. Edward Blackwell sat astride a sleek black horse, looking as immaculate as ever in his tailored riding clothes. His face, handsome in a conventional way, betrayed no emotion, but his eyes burned with a cold fury that Nora remembered all too well. "Edward," she acknowledged, fighting to keep her voice steady. "How did you find me?" Edward dismounted with fluid grace, handing his reins to one of his companions. "Did you really think you could hide forever? That I wouldn't track down every lead, follow every rumor until I found what belongs to me?" "I don't belong to you," Nora said, her voice stronger now. "I never did." Edward's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We were engaged, my dear. In the eyes of society, that creates certain obligations." "Which ended when you broke my arm," Nora countered, refusing to back down despite the fear clawing at her throat. Edward took a step toward her, and Nora instinctively stepped back. "A regrettable incident," he said dismissively. "You provoked me, as you well know, but I'm willing to be magnanimous. Come home with me now, and we'll put this unfortunate episode behind us." "I am home," Nora replied, lifting her chin defiantly, "and I'm not going anywhere with you." Edward's expression hardened. "Don't be foolish, Nora. Your father's health continues to decline. He needs the care that only my money can provide. Would you abandon him out of stubbornness?" The mention of her father twisted like a knife in Nora's heart. It had been Edward's primary leverage during their engagement, the promise of the best medical care for her ailing parent. "My father would rather die than see me under your control again," she said, praying it was true. "And I would rather die than go back to you." Edward's hand moved so quickly that Nora had no time to react. His fingers closed around her wrist, gripping with a familiar, bruising pressure. "That can be arranged," he hissed, his carefully maintained facade cracking to reveal the rage beneath. "But first, you'll come home and fulfill your obligations. I've been made to look the fool for months. That debt will be paid. Let her go." The command, spoken with quiet authority, came from behind Nora. Hunter stood a few yards away, his stance relaxed but his eyes hard as flint. In his hand was a rifle, not pointed directly at Edward but held ready. Edward's grip on Nora's wrist tightened. "This doesn't concern you, Cowboy. The lady and I have unfinished business." "The lady has a name," Hunter replied evenly, "and she's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go." Edward laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Do you have any idea who I am, who my family is, the connections I have?" "I know exactly who you are," Hunter said. "You're the man who thinks it's acceptable to hurt women, to hunt them down when they escape you, to threaten them when they refuse you." He took a step forward, the rifle still held casually but ready. "Now, I'll say it one more time. Let her go." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Edward released Nora's wrist. She immediately backed away, moving to stand beside Hunter. "You're making a serious mistake," Edward warned, his voice cold with fury. "This woman is my fiancé." "Former fiancé," Hunter corrected. "Current fiancé to me." He glanced briefly at Nora, his eyes softening. "Are you all right?" Nora nodded, rubbing her wrist where Edward's fingers had left red marks. "I'm fine." Edward's gaze darted between them, noting the protective way Hunter stood beside Nora, the way she leaned subtly toward him. "So that's how it is," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "You fled your obligations to play house with a cowboy." "I fled for my life," Nora retorted. "And I found something I never had with you: respect, kindness, love." "Love," Edward repeated mockingly. "How quaint, and does your cowboy know about the money you stole when you ran?" "About the family jewelry you took," Nora stiffened. "I took nothing that wasn't mine. The money was my inheritance from my mother. The only jewelry I took was my mother's locket, which you had no right to keep from me." Hunter's expression remained steady, his faith in her unshaken by Edward's accusations. "I think you should leave now," he said, addressing Edward. "Nora has made her choice clear." Edward's face contorted with rage, his careful veneer of civility finally cracking completely. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You think you're safe here, you think this ranch hand can protect you. I have resources you can't imagine. I will have what's mine." "She isn't yours," Hunter said simply. "She never was." Edward turned to his companions, who had remained mounted during the confrontation. "We're leaving, for now." His eyes, cold with malice, fixed on Nora one last time. "Enjoy your rustic paradise while it lasts, my dear. It won't be for long." With that, he mounted his horse and the three men rode away, their figures growing smaller as they headed back toward town. Nora watched them go, her body trembling with the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. Only when they had disappeared from sight did she allow herself to lean against Hunter, drawing strength from his solid presence. "He found me," she whispered, the reality of it sinking in at last. "After all this time, all this distance." Hunter set the rifle aside and wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "But he didn't take you," he pointed out gently. "And he won't." Nora looked up at him, her eyes troubled. "You don't know him, Hunter. He doesn't give up when he wants something." "And he has money, influence, so do I," Hunter interrupted. "Maybe not as much money, but influence of my own. This is my land, my town. People here know me, trust me. They don't know him." "He'll try again," Nora warned. "Let him," Hunter replied, his voice hardening. "Next time, I won't be so polite." Nora knew he meant it, and while part of her took comfort in his protection, another part worried about what Edward might do not just to her, but to Hunter and the ranch. "We should talk to the sheriff," Hunter decided, guiding Nora toward the house with an arm around her waist. "Make him aware of the situation." Nora nodded, though she wasn't convinced it would help. Edward's type knew how to work around the law when necessary. Still, Hunter was right, they needed all the allies they could get. That night, after they had spoken to Sheriff Wilson and explained the situation, Nora sat with Hunter on the porch, watching as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "for bringing this trouble to your door." Hunter took her hand, his thumb tracing over the engagement ring on her finger. "You have nothing to apologize for. This is where you belong now, with me." "But what if, no what ifs," Hunter interrupted gently. "We deal with what is, not what might be. Right now, you're here safe. We're together, the wedding's in 2 weeks. That's what matters." Nora wished she could share his certainty, but Edward's appearance had reopened wounds she thought had begun to heal. The fear was back, lurking beneath the surface of every moment. "Maybe we should postpone the wedding," she suggested reluctantly, "until we're sure he's gone for good." Hunter shook his head firmly. "That's letting him win, letting him control your life, our life, even from a distance. Is that what you want?" "No," Nora admitted, "but I'm scared, Hunter. Not just for me, but for you." Hunter turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Nora, listen to me. I've faced rustlers, wolves, blizzards, drought. I've built this ranch from what my father left me into something I'm proud of. I'm not afraid of a man like Edward Blackwell." His certainty was like a balm to Nora's troubled spirit. "I love you," she whispered. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," Hunter promised. 2 weeks from now, you'll be Nora Xander, and nothing, not Edward, not anyone is going to stop that." Despite her fears, Nora found herself believing him. She leaned forward to kiss him, pouring all her hope and love and determination into the contact. Whatever Edward was planning, they would face it together. The next 2 weeks passed in a state of heightened vigilance. Hunter arranged for one of the ranch hands to be on watch at all times, and Nora never went anywhere alone. They heard through town gossip that Edward and his men had taken rooms at the hotel in Copper Creek, apparently in no hurry to leave the area. Sheriff Wilson paid them a visit 3 days after Edward's appearance at the ranch. "Thought you should know," he said, accepting a cup of coffee from Nora. "That Blackwell fellow's been asking questions all over town about you, the ranch, your wedding plans." Hunter's expression darkened. "What kind of questions? Who you do business with, who supports you in town, when exactly the wedding's happening?" The sheriff shook his head. "I don't like it, Xander. Man's up to something." "Can you run him out of town?" Hunter asked. "For threatening Nora," Wilson sighed. "On what grounds?" "It's his word against yours that any threats were made. And he's being mighty careful to stay within the law while he's in town, paying his bills, being polite to everyone, even made a donation to the church building fund." "Buying goodwill," Nora murmured, understanding Edward's tactics all too well. "Exactly," Wilson agreed. "Look, I'll keep an eye on him, but my advice, have that wedding sooner rather than later, maybe with less notice given around town." Hunter nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you, Sheriff. We'll consider it." After Wilson left, Hunter and Nora discussed their options. Moving the wedding up seemed risky given the preparations already in place, but waiting the full 2 weeks gave Edward more time to implement whatever plan he was forming. "What about tomorrow?" Nora suggested suddenly. "Just us, the minister, and a couple of witnesses. No announcement, no gathering that Edward could interrupt." Hunter considered the idea. "It would mean giving up the celebration we planned, the dress you've been working on. Are you sure that's what you want?" Nora thought about it, then nodded firmly. "What I want is to be your wife. The rest is just details." The smile that lit Hunter's face was worth any sacrifice. "Then tomorrow it is. I'll ride into town at first light, speak to Reverend Thomas, ask the sheriff and his wife to be our witnesses. And I'll stay here with Joe and Bill," Nora added, referring to the 2 ranch hands who would remain behind. "Just until I get back," Hunter promised. "Then we'll be married by noon and Edward Blackwell can go to hell." The plan was set. That night, as Hunter walked Nora to her bedroom door for what would be the last time, their goodnight kiss was filled with both anticipation and defiance, a declaration that their future would not be dictated by fear. Morning dawned clear and bright, as if the weather itself approved of their hasty wedding plans. Hunter left at sunrise, promising to return within a few hours with the minister and witnesses. Nora busied herself with preparations, setting out her best dress, not the blue wool, which wasn't quite finished, but a simple green one that Hunter had once said brought out the color of her eyes. She arranged her hair carefully, pinning it up in a style that was both practical and feminine. By mid-morning she was ready, waiting anxiously for the sound of approaching horses that would signal Hunter's return. The ranch hands, Joe and Bill, kept watch from the porch and the barn, alert for any sign of trouble. When hoofbeats finally sounded on the road, Nora's heart leapt with excitement. She hurried to the window, expecting to see Hunter leading a small party. Instead, what she saw made her blood run cold. Edward Blackwell, accompanied by his 2 men and 3 others she didn't recognize, was approaching the ranch at a deliberate pace. "Joe," she called urgently. "Bill," the ranch hands were already moving, Joe hurrying to the house while Bill positioned himself by the barn, rifle in hand. "I see 'em, Miss Finley," Joe said grimly, coming to stand beside her at the window. 6 of 'em, and the boss not back yet. Nora's mind raced. Hunter wouldn't return for at least another hour, maybe more. Until then, it was just her and 2 loyal ranch hands against Edward and his men. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Joe checked his revolver, his weathered face set in determined lines. "We hold him off till the boss gets back. Bill's a good shot, and so am I. They'll think twice about charging in." Nora nodded, drawing courage from his confidence. "I'll get the rifle from the study." By the time she returned with Hunter's Winchester, Edward and his men had reached the yard. They remained mounted, spread out in a loose semicircle facing the house. "Nora," Edward called, his voice carrying clearly through the morning air. "Come out." "We need to talk." Joe moved to the door, positioning himself so that he was visible but protected. "Miss Finley ain't interested in talking," he called back. "Mr. Xander will be back soon. You'd best be gone before he gets here." Edward laughed, the sound chilling in its lack of warmth. "The cowboy's not here. How convenient. That simplifies matters considerably." He turned to his men. "Secure the barn and the bunkhouse. The lady and I have private business to discuss." As 2 of Edward's men dismounted and headed toward the barn where Bill was positioned, Nora felt a surge of fear for the loyal ranch hand. "Bill," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "Be careful." A shot rang out, kicking up dirt near the feet of Edward's men, Bill's warning. "That's close enough," Bill shouted from his position. "Next one won't miss." For a tense moment, it seemed the standoff would escalate into open violence. Then Edward raised a hand, signaling his men to hold. "I see Xander's trained his dogs well," he observed coldly. "But this is between Nora and myself. A domestic matter, you might say." "Ain't nothing domestic about hunting down a woman who doesn't want you," Joe retorted. "Now back off before someone gets hurt." Edward's expression hardened. "The only one getting hurt will be anyone who stands between me and what's mine." He turned his attention back to the house. "Nora, you have 1 minute to come out, or I'll burn this place to the ground with everyone in it." To emphasize his point, one of his men held up a kerosene lamp, clearly taken from their supplies. Nora's breath caught in her throat. The threat was no bluff. Edward was fully capable of such destruction when thwarted. She looked at Joe, whose face had paled beneath his tan. "He'll do it," she said quietly. "I know him." Joe shook his head. "Boss would never forgive me if I let you go out there. And I'll never forgive myself if this ranch Hunter's home. His legacy burns because of me." Nora set the rifle aside, her decision made. "I have to go out there." "Miss Finley, keep watch for Hunter," Nora interrupted. Tell him I love him." Before Joe could stop her, she moved past him and opened the door, stepping onto the porch with her head held high. Edward smiled when he saw her, a predator's smile of satisfaction. "There you are, my dear. So good of you to be reasonable." "What do you want, Edward?" Nora asked, forcing her voice to remain calm. "You know very well what I want," Edward replied. "You back where you belong. This farce has gone on long enough." "It's not a farce," Nora countered. "I'm going to marry Hunter Xander." Edward's smile vanished. "No, you're not. You're coming with me today, and we're putting this unfortunate episode behind us. And if I refuse," Edward gestured to the man with the lamp, "then your cowboy returns to find his precious ranch in ashes." "Is that what you want? To destroy everything he's built because of your stubbornness?" Nora looked around at the ranch, the house Hunter had grown up in, the barn he had rebuilt with his own hands, the corrals and outbuildings that represented generations of hard work. Could she be responsible for its destruction? If I go with you, she said slowly, you'll leave this place and everyone on it unharmed. Nora, no, Joe protested from the doorway behind her. Edward ignored the interruption, his eyes fixed on Nora. You have my word. Come with me now without fuss, and Xander's ranch remains intact. It was a devil's bargain, and Nora knew it. Once she was back under Edward's control, there would be no second escape. He would make certain of that. But the alternative was to risk everything Hunter loved, to let his home and livelihood be destroyed because of her. I need to get my things, she said, playing for time. Edward shook his head. No need, I'll buy you new things. Better things, we leave now. Nora hesitated, her mind racing desperately for a solution. In the distance, she thought she heard the sound of approaching riders, but it might have been wishful thinking. Time's up, Nora, Edward said impatiently. Make your choice. Before she could respond, the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked echoed from the side of the house. Hunter emerged from the cover of the trees that lined the property, rifle aimed steadily at Edward. Behind him came Sheriff Wilson and 4 other men from town, all armed. She already made her choice, Blackwell, Hunter said, his voice cold with fury. It wasn't you. Edward's face contorted with rage as he realized he had been outmaneuvered. Xander, he spat, always turning up at the most inconvenient moments. It's my ranch, Hunter replied evenly. And that's my fiancé you're threatening. Sheriff Wilson moved forward, his badge glinting in the sunlight. Edward Blackwell, you're under arrest for trespassing, making threats, and attempted kidnapping. Edward laughed incredulously. On whose authority? Do you have any idea who my family is? The influence we wield. This is Montana territory, not wherever you come from, Wilson replied. And out here, threatening a woman and trying to burn down a man's ranch will get you hanged, family connections or not. As the sheriff's men surrounded Edward and his companions, disarming them one by one, Hunter made his way to Nora, never taking his eyes off Edward until he reached her side. Are you all right? He asked, his voice gentle despite the anger evident in his rigid posture. Nora nodded, tears of relief filling her eyes. You came back early. Something didn't feel right, Hunter explained, putting an arm around her shoulders. I convinced the sheriff to ride back with me just to be safe. His expression darkened as he looked at Edward, now being handcuffed by one of Wilson's deputies. Good thing we did. Edward glared at them, his handsome face ugly with hate. This isn't over, he warned. You think a backwater sheriff can hold me? My family will have me out within days. Maybe, Hunter acknowledged. But by then, Nora will be my wife, legally and properly. And if you ever come near her again, I'll kill you without hesitation or regret. The simple, matter-of-fact statement sent a chill through the yard. No one who heard it doubted Hunter's sincerity. As Edward was led away, still hurling threats and promises of retribution, Nora turned to Hunter, her heart full of love and gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, for coming back in time. Hunter drew her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I'll always come back for you, Nora, always. Behind them, Reverend Thomas cleared his throat politely. Not to intrude on the moment, but I believe I was brought here to perform a wedding ceremony. Hunter looked at Nora questioningly, giving her the chance to postpone if the morning's events had been too traumatic. But Nora had never been more certain of anything in her life. Yes, she said firmly. Right now, if you please, Reverend. And so, with the sheriff and his wife as witnesses, and Joe and Bill standing proudly to the side, Nora Finley and Hunter Xander were married on the porch of the ranch house where they had found each other. The ceremony was simple, the words time-honored, but the love that flowed between them as they exchanged vows was profound. I now pronounce you man and wife, Reverend Thomas declared with a broad smile. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Xander. Hunter needed no further invitation. He gathered Nora in his arms and kissed her with a passion that left no doubt about his feelings, drawing appreciative chuckles from their small audience. When they finally parted, Hunter kept his arms around Nora, unwilling to let her go. Mrs. Xander, he said softly, testing the name. I like the sound of that, Nora replied, her smile radiant with happiness. As the small wedding party made their way into the house for a celebratory meal, Nora paused to look back at the ranch, her home now, truly and legally. The threat of Edward Blackwell still loomed, but for the first time since she had fled her hometown, Nora felt not just safe but truly free. She had stopped running and started living. And with Hunter by her side, she was ready to face whatever the future might bring. That night, after their guests had departed and the ranch hands had retired to the bunkhouse, Hunter led Nora to the bedroom that would now be theirs to share. The room had been his since childhood, but now it bore touches of Nora's presence, her hairbrush on the dresser, her shawl draped over the chair, the quilt she had brought from her room folded neatly at the foot of the bed. "Welcome home," Hunter said, his voice husky with emotion and desire. Nora looked up at him, her heart full to bursting. "I am home," she replied, "wherever you are." Hunter cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "I love you, Nora Xander, more than I have words to express." "Then show me," she whispered, rising on tiptoe to press her lips to his. The kiss deepened, months of restraint finally giving way to the passion they had both kept carefully in check. Hunter's hands moved to the buttons of her dress, his fingers deft despite their trembling. "Are you sure?" he asked, pausing to search her face. Nora answered by guiding his hands back to her dress. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Slowly, reverently, they undressed each other, discovering with wonder the contours of each other's bodies. Every touch was a revelation, every kiss a promise. When they finally came together as husband and wife, it was with a tenderness and passion that transcended the physical act, binding them in a way neither had experienced before. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the moonlight that filtered through the curtains, Nora rested her head on Hunter's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What are you thinking?" Hunter asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I'm happy," Nora replied honestly. "Truly, completely happy. I didn't know if I would ever feel this way again." Hunter pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Nora, and I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." "Even with Edward still out there?" Nora couldn't help asking, the shadow of fear briefly clouding her contentment. Hunter's arms tightened around her protectively. "Even then, Sheriff Wilson will hold him as long as legally possible, and by then, we'll be prepared for whatever comes next. But don't let the fear of him rob you of this moment, this happiness. He's taken enough from you already." Nora nodded, determined not to let thoughts of Edward intrude on her wedding night. "You're right, this is our time now, our life. Our future," Hunter added, his voice warm with promise. As they drifted towards sleep in each other's arms, Nora sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the twist of fate that had led her to this ranch, this man, this life. She had tried to sleep in a hayloft, seeking nothing more than temporary shelter. Instead, she had found a home, a husband, and a happiness she had thought forever beyond her reach. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Hunter by her side. No longer running, no longer afraid. At last, truly free. True to Hunter's prediction, Edward Blackwell was released from custody after 5 days, his family's influence extending even to the remote Montana territory. But by then, word had spread throughout Copper Creek and the surrounding ranches of what he had attempted to do. The town, protective of its own, closed ranks around the newly married Xanders. When Edward tried to book a room at the hotel, he was told there were no vacancies. When he sought to purchase supplies at the general store, the owner claimed to be out of stock on everything he requested. Even the saloon, which rarely turned away paying customers, refused to serve him. The message was clear. Edward Blackwell was not welcome in Copper Creek. Before the week was out, Edward and his men had departed, heading east toward more hospitable territory. But not before he had left a note for Nora, delivered by a reluctant stable boy. "This isn't over," it reads simply. "What's mine remains mine." Hunter had wanted to burn the note, but Nora kept it as a reminder not of fear, but of what she had overcome to find happiness. Spring bloomed across the ranch, bringing with it new calves, fresh grass, and the fruit trees Hunter had promised. Nora planted her vegetable garden, larger now to feed the household that had grown to include 2 additional ranch hands as the cattle operation expanded. Life settled into a routine that was both familiar and wonderfully new. The work was hard but satisfying, the days full, and the nights sweet. Hunter and Nora worked side by side, building not just a ranch but a life together. In late May, just as the wildflowers carpeted the plains in a riot of color, Nora received a letter that brought both joy and anxiety. It was from Catherine, Edward's sister, forwarded through several intermediaries to maintain secrecy. "Dearest Nora," it began. "Your letter reached me at last, and I cannot express how relieved I am to know you are safe and happy." Edward returned home in a fury, his pride wounded more than his heart. He speaks of returning west when business permits, though I believe this is more threat than intention. Catherine went on to share news of Nora's father, whose health had indeed declined, but who was being cared for by Catherine herself, not Edward as had been threatened. "He asks for you often," she wrote, "but understands why you had to leave. His only wish is for your happiness." The letter closed with a caution. "Be vigilant, dear friend. My brother's memory is long and his pride unforgiving. But know that you have allies even here in the East. Live your life with joy, not fear. That is the best revenge against those who would control us." The letter brought tears to Nora's eyes, but they were tears of both sadness and relief. Her father was being cared for. Catherine remained her ally. And though the threat of Edward lingered, it seemed more distant now, less immediate. "We could bring your father here," Hunter suggested when Nora shared the letter with him. "There's room in the house, and the mountain air might be good for his health." The offer, made without hesitation, only deepened Nora's love for her husband. "Catherine says he's too frail to travel now," she replied sadly. "But perhaps when he's stronger." Hunter nodded, understanding her grief. "We'll send a letter back with Catherine. Let him know he's welcome whenever he's able to make the journey." Summer passed in a blaze of heat and activity. The cattle thrived, the garden yielded bountifully, and the ranch prospered under Hunter and Nora's joint stewardship. They rode together in the evenings, exploring the far reaches of the property, planning expansions and improvements. And at night, in the privacy of their bedroom, they loved each other with a passion that only deepened with time and intimacy. It was in early autumn, as the leaves began to turn and the nights grew cooler, that Nora shared the news she had been quietly celebrating for weeks. "Hunter," she said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and gold. "I have something to tell you." Hunter turned to her, his expression curious. "What is it?" Nora took his hand and placed it gently on her abdomen, still flat but harboring the most precious secret. "We're going to have a baby. In spring." The joy that transformed Hunter's face was something Nora knew she would remember all her days. He gathered her into his arms, laughing and crying at once, his happiness too great for words alone. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "Our baby," Nora nodded, her own eyes bright with tears of joy. "Our future growing right here." That night, as Hunter held her close, his hand protectively cradling the place where their child grew, Nora thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The fear and pain that had driven her from her home. The desperation that had led her to sleep in a stranger's hayloft. The courage it had taken to trust again, to love again, and the cowboy who had found her, seen her worth, and offered her not just shelter but a home, not just safety but love. "What are you thinking about?" Hunter murmured against her hair, sensing her reflective mood. Nora smiled in the darkness. "About how everything changed the day you found me in your hayloft, how that moment altered the course of both our lives." Hunter's arms tightened around her. "Best discovery I ever made," he said softly. "Though I still think you would have been more comfortable in my bed." Nora laughed, remembering the night weeks after they were married, when Hunter had told her how he had almost invited her to share his bed that very first night, not for improper reasons, but simply because the hayloft was no place for a lady to sleep. "Your bed waited for me," she replied, turning in his arms to face him. "And now I can't imagine sleeping anywhere else." "Nor I," Hunter agreed, pressing a tender kiss to her lips. "Rest now, both of you, tomorrow's coming early." As Nora drifted towards sleep, safe in her husband's embrace, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the twist of fate that had led her to Copper Creek, to the Xander Ranch, to Hunter. She had tried to sleep in the hayloft, seeking nothing more than temporary shelter. Instead, she had found a home, a husband, and a happiness she had thought forever beyond her reach. And now, with their child growing beneath her heart, that happiness was complete.